my right thumb can make a proper straight thumbs up, but my left thumb is fucking weird.
How far can you go with that? That's the furthest.
No, it goes. I didn't make that. I just meant that I can make the straight.
It's probably
thumb.
because you kept sticking that thumb up too many people's asses.
Welcome, guys. This is the second episode of Red Switch, the podcast. My name is Oiva, and next to me I have Adamya.
Hello.
And then Suresh.
Hey.
And Bart.
Hello.
That's cool. We'll just...
Now that was the Red Switch podcast. Thanks for coming. Tune in next week.
Did you have anything to say?
Okay.
Oh, should we start with something funny?
Let's start with something funny. Do you have any?
No. Funniness needs to come in, like the way.
Because I was told that
funniness does have to.
We need to
actually,
get the audience like that's what I was told. Like it was just sort of like too.
Yeah.
formal.
Okay. Let's start with
what's pissed anyone off this week?
Let's not talk about exams that people don't want to hear about.
Let's start with some follow-up. Let's just what has the feedback been generally from the first episode? What can we do?
What was it?
Well,
Well, no, go.
I got feedback like you introduced a very interesting topic of like, did you think you're destined into your field or area of study? And then you answered very nicely to that, and Adamya too. And then I just kind of like, I don't know, thrashed the entire topic. I didn't really answer to it, but I guess
that was a shame actually.
I guess my response was a little bad, but my opinion just was on that topic that I don't think there's such a thing as destined to be some profession. It's a very old way, in my opinion, to think about professions or like life in general. Maybe that's just my opinion.
If I remember correctly, I didn't think of it as sort of talking about destiny. It was more that when you look at yourself, and everyone has some kind of understanding of who they are. I was just asking, like, what is that closely linked to what we're doing? And in the case of Suresh, it very much was. You think you're quite, you were kind of destined to go into engineering as a thing, like it was a natural progression from what he did when he was younger, who he thought he was, and if you now describe to someone else who you are, engineering would come up in that explanation. Definitely. So it's not really destiny as much as just sort of associating who you are with your field. Whilst I feel like I might be less inclined to associate who I am with maths or computer science. Maybe computer science, but maths is more a thing that I study, but I don't see it as a real defining characteristic of me.
Okay. Yeah, maybe it was, maybe I got just carried away once Suresh kind of gave a chronological view on it. Like, since he's been small, he's been into breaking up stuff and restructuring it, which is quite nice.
To an extent.
To an extent, yeah.
Making things worse. What it is to say.
Attempting to improve stuff and ending up with something that does much less.
I was also told that we should engage topics like quick, sharp, make them funny. Well, not make them funny, just like humorous and lighthearted, and then slowly move into something.
There's a lot we can do in regards to introducing a topic as sort of briefly as possible. Just saying, let's talk about this. One sentence, two sentences, and then we just go for it. We like go on a roll then.
Did any of you guys watch the Top Gear episode? I don't know.
Oh, the new one?
The new one.
Who's in it now?
It's Chris Evans and Matt LeBlanc.
Matt LeBlanc?
Yeah, that is... But to be fair, like Chris, they've got Matt LeBlanc, who's an ex-Hollywood star, and Chris Evans, who's a radio presenter primarily, and they've kind of bunged them two together in this show to like... And it's... Basically, the general consensus, it was terrible. And I watched it, and it was cringeworthy terrible, because what they're trying to do is force chemistry upon.
Yeah.
Because when the original Top Gear started, they picked a presenter, Jeremy Clarkson, and he picked his mates to just come on with him. And it was just a bit of a laugh. It wasn't like, anything serious. And they were supposed to do a car show, but they just ended up, messing about. But now they've got like Chris Evans and Matt LeBlanc, and it's just you could see the full sort of the chemistry trying to be like forced onto upon them.
Yeah, it has to be a bunch of mates.
Yeah, and it was terrible. And then there was this amazing moment where so many people said hate to Chris Evans, and he just started like. He completely lost it on Twitter, and he's like, he started stating facts because they're like, oh, more people watch this episode than the last season's first episode. But most people are responding with like, well, they want to see it because it's your first episode. Obviously, more people will watch it. It's just that everyone hated it.
What I always thought was crazy about Top Gear is it's not. In my mind, it's not something that's exclusively for people who like cars. I'm not particularly interested in cars, but I thought Top Gear was always extremely entertaining.
Yeah.
Because there's something really, like, stupid about it. It's just, like, three morons, like, trying to make fun of each other and competing against each other in really, like, stupid competitions where they actually play with the worst of cars, not really the best ones. Yeah. Where they, like, demolish themselves on road trips and shit like that. Yeah. It's funny. It's really funny. And it's a very kind of... Like a delicate format. It's so like it's very closely associated with the people that were in it.
Yeah.
It was like it wouldn't be the same if you just swap out the people.
Yeah. Chris Evans was completely wrong for the show. He was every time like he was trying to get fake involved in the people going, "Oh yeah," when like he's in a car and you're just like, "Oh please, buddy, give it a rest." Like it was horrible. And there's an amazing interview where they're like, so like they asked James like what happened. And he's like, James Whale was just like, yeah, James is a knob, but I like him.
That's the whole show.
Yeah, they just hate each other, but they're mates. That's what mates do, don't they?
Yeah.
And then they're gonna create this Amazon thing where they're just gonna go and they're gonna.
They've been bought by Amazon or Netflix or something.
No, it's Amazon, and they're gonna call it the Grand Tour now. It's coming out quite.
So same thing.
Yeah, basically them three are just gonna go around the world. So those road trips they used to do like every once in a while on Top Gear. Now they're gonna like do 3 seasons.
Oh, that's cool.
Of 8 episodes each.
Nice.
Of just going around the world and just messing about.
But it's like a good thing because now they have like a bit of a change going.
Yeah, well they wanted to call it Gear Knobs, but Top Gear like no, you can't have that. That's too close to Top Gear.
Gear Knobs, but still not Top Gear, right?
No, but yeah, it's like naming rights and stuff, aren't they? Yeah.
I don't know if you can do that.
BBC kind of, I think messed up. There was like the biggest source of income for BBC. I think Top Gear was.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like a hard position for them as well. Like if you punch,
they'd get BBC would get a lot of hate about sort of having no backbone if they just allow that to happen.
BBC
just because they want to keep their most glamorous show going, that they're considering to sort of swipe under the rug the fact that one of the hosts is going around punching a producer.
He's not going around just punching every
Hey, how are you doing today?
Just going around punching producers.
No, you get what I mean. If they just are fine with that kind of behavior, that's showing that if you're famous enough, if you're big enough as a star, you can get away with anything, and that's the critique that sort of BBC was getting, is that they're okay. They're just sort of standing by and letting it happen.
I'm completely on BBC here. Like I couldn't care less for these kind of like big shots. Like they act too pompous anyway.
Yeah, fair enough. I can see what they did as well. But still, it is biting the hand that feeds them a little bit.
You know what I want to talk about?
What's up?
This past week, well, we're all in our sort of exam season in our year at the moment. We are.
Mm-hmm.
Us three, with all with the exception of Suresh, we're in our first year. Suresh, you're in like 18th year, 7th, 5th.
Yep.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
The double degree.
Yeah. So did you start your
2012.
No. Did you start your like degree when you were like 15 or something?
Well, I'm 23 now, so no.
Okay.
I'm not that smart.
So we're all in our exam season, and this thing that always kind of confuses me is how people act and behave in exam seasons, because people get stressed, and I don't know why they get stressed in this very irrational sort of hyperbole way. But they keep on acting as if like they're completely screwed, they're gonna fail the year, it's all terrible. And I don't get it. Sort of first of all, yeah, that's my first reaction is, it's like, why are you acting that way? This is just stress for no reason, and it's just kind of stupid and it's annoying. But then I get to thinking and I move on from this just simple opinion or whatever, and I'm like, okay, where does this stress come from? How do people manage to get really stressed? And my personal theory is that stress is a product of uncertainties. What I mean with that is, if you're in an exam season and whatever, it's not the work that you have to do or the exams that you have to sit that are stressing people out. It's the uncertainties that come along with them. One uncertainty would be you don't know what's on the exam. Another uncertainty might be that you don't know the sort of what you got to learn. You haven't organized out how you're going to do everything in the right amount of time, so your time planning is uncertain. Every point along the way, when it comes to doing exams, there are places where you can fit in a bit of uncertainty, where you can make it slightly sort of iffy, where you're kind of not on solid ground. And at any point that you do that, you're going to become more stressed. So stress just comes from not knowing how to plan your time, not knowing what to do with your time, not knowing what's on the exams, not knowing what you have to get from the exams.
No, I think it's more of a social thing, dude. No one likes a guy who's like, you know what, I'm going to ace this exam. Everyone hates that dude. It's like, oh yeah, this is going to be easy, and you're just sitting there.
Yeah. No, that's not what I mean. That's not what, let me complete it. The reason why I bring this up is that in the past week I think I found a really great way of getting rid of most of the stress that I had. And the way I did that was going kind of back to front instead of front to back in terms of revision. I started from what do I need at the end of the year, then went a bit back again to what would I need in this exam, then I went back to how much do I need to revise to get at least that, and then I was very directed and sort of could work a lot better because I knew exactly how much I needed to do, and I knew exactly how much I needed in the exam, and I had ways of quantifying how my progress was going, because I knew that, okay, on this day I did a paper and I got about 20%, next day I did one that got 30, and I can see the progress and I can see the goal being, say, 55 or 60% in that paper. I can see how it's going from day to day, and I've gotten rid of lots of uncertainties along the way. Uncertainties that I did have before. I didn't know how much I had to get in this exam for me to realistically get the result I want at the end of the year. I didn't know what I had to revise or how much of one subject I really needed to revise in order to get that grade. But by starting all the way at the end result and working my way backwards, I'm now in a situation where I feel practically no stress at all. Because I know exactly, I can invest a bit of time here, I can invest a bit of time there. And it's working really well, instead of me just sitting around so sort of unorganized, so disorganized that I don't know where to begin, and I end up doing far less work than the work I'm doing now. That's what I mean with stress comes from uncertainty.
Okay. Well, when people I think that's over-analysis of it. I think, you've thought about this way too much.
You've got way too much time. You know when you have too much time on your hand, when you're like, in the exam period, you're like, let's go all the way back to the beginning of the year, analyse it completely.
This is it. You should have been doing a past paper when you're doing that shit. I think it's just like, if you're going around to people and be like, I'm so stressed, I'm so good for this exam, it's going to be so easy, I'm sorted. And for people who've done jack shit throughout the year, they're going to be like, this guy's a dick, just showing off. He's just like, oh, I'm so good, I'm so smart, yada, yada, yada. It's just like a social thing. You don't go to people like, I'm really good, how are you feeling for the exam? And then they're like, oh, not too good. But like, well, I'm fucking fantastic, so screw you. It's just like, you should have just share their worries and stuff with them as well. And also, people also stress because they haven't done like the actual work throughout the year. And so there comes a point where, like, have I done enough to pass the subject? Like, have I done this to pass? Like, it is uncertainty, but it's more like they just want to make sure they get what they're getting, and because they just feel like they haven't done enough, I guess. Oh, wait, that is uncertainty, isn't it?
Yeah. It comes back to my theory. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I was getting a bit sort of annoyed at a friend on my course who keeps on going on about how he's going to fail the year, and it really upsets me because, you know, I don't want to see him fail, but most of all, he's not. Like, he's not in as bad a position as he thinks. And so I went to his dorm yesterday, sat down with him, and like created a spreadsheet of all of the grades he has, all of the grades he need to get to pass the year, and it's fine. Like, he could fail almost all of the upcoming exams and he'd still pass. And like not fail at like 40%, I mean 0% on most of these exams, and he'd pass. And then he'd been going on the days before about how he's, you know, in such a bad position, you're going to fail, and it's that attitude just comes from the fact that he had no clue what he was going to get. He just thought that any bad grade on like one of the exams would result in failing the year, which is not true. And just showing him, this is what you need to do. That's the one important exam, the rest are not important, for example. But just pinpointing what he actually needs to do, he can spend 1 hour a day doing that. Like, that's nothing. And he can pass the year, and he can get even a good grade. Now he can think not only about passing the year, but he can think about sort of being more ambitious and getting a good grade at the end of the year, or getting a 2.2 or a 2.1. That kind of thinking just comes from getting rid of that uncertainty, getting rid of that terrible attitude that they have. And then you can actually do stuff. And you could say, oh yeah, you should have spent that time doing past papers instead. You've been thinking way too into this. And I don't get that either. I don't understand where you're coming from that, because I'm investing time now into something that's not directly helping my studies to then almost supercharge the work I can do afterwards. And that's how, that's the whole idea of a tool. You spend some time building a tool so that for all the time afterwards, you're 10 times more efficient. And yeah, you've got some time that you might consider that, you're wasting your time building that tool. But eventually, you're actually being far more productive as a consequence of that. And I feel like my revision has been far more productive since writing up all of this, figuring out exactly what my grade should be, even though that took me an hour or two. Those hour or two were maybe the best 2 hours I could have spent for the entire exam season.
Yeah, fair enough. I can agree with that. Also, but like the opposite's true as well, where if you do that, you sort of get complacent with what you need to do as well. Do you know what I mean? You start saying that's all I need to do, so you sort of just strive for something. But if you're sort of deluded a little bit, like I have to do a lot more work, you sort of push yourself to do heaps where you didn't actually need to, and you could also achieve a higher mark there. I found when I've done similar things to you, I sort of get content with my plan. So I've always had to sort of delude myself a bit. Like, I need to do really well here, otherwise I'm going to do badly. And that way, my mind's just like, shit. Then I start doing heaps of work. So I need stress to do well. Otherwise, I'm just too content and I don't care about anything. So I work with stress.
I think that works good at the beginning of the year when you're trying to get your maximum. But I think near the end of the year, you need to kind of like be a bit more realistic, because at the end of the year, you can't really be like, if there's 3 exams in a row, you can't be like, I'm going to put my maximum effort in all 3 of them and like sit on a module and just try and do all of it, because it's literally time that's a problem.
No.
So you're going to try and like get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm getting this in the paper, I'm going to stop that, move on to the next one, and because I know what I need in every paper.
I completely agree with Suresh on this one, where you do get complacent with it. Once you know exactly what you need, I think you tend to become less ambitious.
Yeah.
Because you've got this idea that not only can you try and get a good grade, but you don't have to if you're a bit tired that day. You can always fall back to the easier plan.
Yeah.
So when ambition and when excellence is just an option that you can take, and it's not the thing you need to do, because you've made it clear to yourself what you could actually do instead, then I think a lot of people, and maybe me in the end, would just fall back to the easier option, which is kind of a shame.
Yeah, exactly right. Because I've done that. Like I'm also realistic about what I'm going to get. I know I'm going to pass. Usually I know I'll pass everything, but I usually want to make sure I get like a decent mark. Right, and I do set my time out decently for everything, but I still want to be a little bit deluded about how well I'm going to do in each subject, so I can just push myself a little bit more. And also having good competition helps as well. Just having others saying, yeah, I'm doing pretty well. You're like, shit, got to pick up my game.
Yeah.
You want to talk about something else, man?
Right. Let's talk about Sam Harris's TED Talk. And I'll put this somewhere in the description
what was
for
the topic?
for the podcast.
What was the topic? Science.
Shall I?
Science can answer moral values. Was that?
Yeah.
Okay. So Sam Harris presented a TED Talk at some point. I don't know if it was recent or not. 2010. So not very recent. Saying that science can answer moral questions, which is relatively controversial, I'd say. And he goes into depth by saying, and sort of relatively, if I can summarize it, because it's quite a long talk, it'll basically be that there isn't an answer to every moral question that is objective, sure, but there are some ways he believes that you can answer some of the questions. You can say that in particular cases it's objectively bad of a moral sort of thing, sort of killing lots of people or raping someone. There's almost objective ways we can prove that that's bad. And there are also, and I don't know if he really argued this, but there might also be places where you can objectively say that a certain way of interacting with people and certain morals that you might have are objectively good, and that there's some kind of way of backing up through science, and since he's coming from a neurology background, he'll even say that you can back it up by just inspecting what's happening inside people's brains to say, okay, this is a happy person and it's not a happy person.
You mean by reducing into
you could call that reducing as well, yeah.
Reducing into conscious effects, yes.
So I highly recommend listening to the talk. You might even want to go away from this podcast for a bit and watch that talk. We'll make sure to put it somewhere near the description or on the podcast page. So if you want to have a quick link to it, you'll find it there. Now, thoughts on this podcast?
Well, I'm just going to throw it out there.
On this podcast.
Sorry. Thoughts on the talk? Yeah, Oiva.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw that out there. You said he goes in depth. I don't think he does really go in depth. He just he's talking about universal objective moralities and then going about assessing those. But what he does, he gives particular examples and then contrasts those to his ideals, his views on the issues, and that's basically what he does. I wouldn't call that in depth. In some ways, they're very superficial, and he also goes to the point where he calls other civilizations unsophisticated, which is extremely unsophisticated thing to say.
Yeah, I guess so. But let's bring up one of the examples he gave, so that we're not just speaking sort of in this bubble of sort of without connecting it to the real world. The one of the primary examples he gave was comparing our society and sort of how women's bodies are sort of restricted.
Wait a second, our society? You mean American society or the US society?
It's relatively similar on this topic, where sort of the magazines you see nowadays have women practically naked on the cover, and it's this extremely sort of sexualized. You could consider it over sexualized,
and men
as well. But predominantly women.
He doesn't mention men, so
he was let's just stick with his example. But he was comparing that to I don't know which country, but one where all the women were forced to wear veils, and where it's almost the opposite of this over sexualizing. It's stopping any sexualization of women, sort of the ultimate modesty in some sense. And he was comparing those two and saying, both of these are not very good. There are bad things about them, but somewhere in the middle there is a better way to treat women or allow women to express themselves that leads to a society that is better off overall.
Yeah, you mean two extremes, right?
Yeah, but by saying that by agreeing that they're two extremes, could we say that that's not just an opinion, but there's some way of maybe objectively speaking that both of these are going to lead to societies that aren't very well off. That we kind of have to work on fixing these things and making society fit perfectly between that we allow women to express themselves, but we don't have the media going off, sort of going to this extreme of over-sexualization, and we don't try to control them where we go to this extreme of complete modesty. And I think he had a very good point there, that there is something objectively bad about either of those options, either of those extremes. And objectively, I mean that, yeah, there is universally, they're both not very good options. It's not a cultural thing. It's not that, it might work in one culture, it might not work in another. I do agree with him that across the board, universally, regardless of whatever culture, that is morally not the best option. And there are better ways you could organize or set up a culture.
Yeah, he brings that up to, should we bring like children and have children be educated in a world like that? On the first extreme, there's sort of a very over-sexualized view on women, obviously. And then there's the other one where, women are voluntarily clothing, have burqas and those sort of clothes on. But then he just goes on and says that it's not actually voluntary.
Do you disagree with that?
I don't know.
It's not voluntary, I'm pretty sure.
I can agree. Even if it was voluntary. Put that in inverted commas. There's sort of a pressure to have it anyway. So even if you're saying that it's voluntary, it's still not voluntary because, as you said, you're looked at in a certain way if you don't wear it.
In those countries, it's not voluntary. There's no you can't voluntarily not wear that. That's just the rule.
Mm.
He's talked about, acid being thrown on their faces if they don't wear it. But I don't know, I think the talk itself, I think he said a lot without saying nothing much. I think he
I can agree with that.
I think he very much sort of touched upon little points and then just went off them and just gave another example. And he didn't really go in depth, and I didn't really enjoy that part of it. So he made some points that were good. So when he talked about the fact that people talk about gay marriage or these little things, and they are what he claimed worst problems on this earth, genocide and stuff like that. So he made a good point, but then he didn't extrapolate on it, and he just left that topic and just went on to another topic. It almost felt like that talk, he had a lot to say, and he wanted to get all in 25 minutes when he probably needed to only set up one thing and really extrapolate on that one point. And I don't think he did that. Which gave it off a slightly bad look because, when the guy who came to question him, he looked kind of pissed off, didn't he? When the guy came on to do a Q&A, he was just like, oh, twat.
Yeah, you're right actually. That wasn't a good TED talk.
Yeah, I think
it's just too much of nothing.
Yeah. And it's got nothing to do with the fact that I agree or disagree with him, because I happen to agree with him. Oiva, you happen to kind of disagree with him. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No,
but effectively, it's just not a very good TED talk, because that's not the best place to express I'd say a relatively complicated idea that can, there are many tangents you can go off on that are all very important and sort of add to the complexity of things, and trying to boil that down to 25 minutes was...
There's one positive thing I wanted to say about him. He did a good... I enjoyed his view on how science can give answers to moral questions. What sort of an economical system is good for us? Does an economical system increase our well-being? Well, that's most likely. And I think that was a good thing. And he also believed that if we go further in life, progress towards this point where moral questions are a lot better, science can give us answers for that. But it's just saying that he's still in one society or one civilization, and then he calls his civilization sophisticated. That's incredibly contradictory.
Did he use those words? Or did he use civilized?
Yeah, he did.
It's sophisticated and unsophisticated.
Okay, I can Yeah, civilized. He says civilized.
Yeah.
But he's also talking like his society is over-sexualizing women. That's not exactly civilized unless that's his opinion of civilized society. And also he's bringing up the gay discussion, the gay problem.
He brought up a lot of things though, and he didn't extrapolate upon them, which is what made it a bad talk. When you were trying to explain what happened in the talk, you struggled because you're like, what really did he make? So it's when I think of a TED talk, I think after it you have like a point to discuss. It's like a question. You're like, what is this? After coming from that TED talk, you're like, oh, it said a lot of things, and we can discuss it, but we can only discuss it for about 20 seconds because they didn't really say much about them.
That's the thing. When you're like, let's talk about that, I was like, what am I going to talk about? Because I have no idea where to direct my conversation.
So it's almost become what makes a good TED talk.
Yeah. This is not a good no. At the end, I think you have to have a clear idea of like that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
And he's backed up that one main opinion that he's pushing or idea that he's pushing with relatively good reasoning. Here he's backing something, but he didn't want to make too wild an idea because he didn't want to get any backlash from it. I feel like
subtle.
he had that pressure.
It's subtle.
Yeah.
I can see his point. He introduces it, but then he leaves it. And that point, in my opinion, was... well, this is an objective opinion right now. And you can surely agree with me. Science can give moral answers. That's fine and good. But that's not the end of the discussion. The moral answers are not only the problem of science. They are a lot vaster problem. It's a lot broader problem. And it's definitely not only science that will give us that answer, or answers for that. But I think Sam Harris was pretty one-sided with this. And he also expressed this idea where science had a moral high ground. And furthermore, that the West, and the point where we are right now, we've progressed to a point where the Western society has the moral high ground and knows what's a sophisticated civilization and can give these moral objectives. But that's not true. You can study like ancient classical society where gay sexuality was definitely a big thing. People didn't frown upon that. It wasn't a big problem or a big question, but in the Western society there still is. And I don't think that's going to be a scientific question either. Like, what's science going to say about gay sexuality?
I think we all have made obviously maybe not all of us, but have made slideshows for school or whatever. And you know when the teacher normally checks whether there's nothing rude in the actual slideshow and there's not a penis pic or something. So they normally, but the thing is, if there's let's say there's a 30-page slideshow, they only check the first 5 or 6. They're like, oh, it's all fine, and they just let you go on. I think what he did for the TED talk, I think generally presenting this is my TED talk, and the guy must have scanned through first 2-3 pages, and he's like, oh, it's just about this. So what he did for the first about 6-7 minutes, he talked about this broader topic, and then he tried to focus and what he really wanted to talk about was Islam, wasn't he? Because that's what he was getting upon, I think. Because he was always kept coming back to the burqa thing, and he kept coming back to the fact, and even the questions were about, and I felt like he almost created a TED talk just to talk about a specific viewpoint that he had, rather than
Exactly. That was
his aim was not to talk about the topic. His aim was to talk about what he wanted to talk about, and he didn't want to put that in the title.
Maybe the funny thing about this was that most of his talk was a rhetorical. Yeah, I know. It was a rhetorical talk. He was kind of an orator, but he was also on a pedestal, and he was given a moral high ground, or moral questions, with a scientific background.
Yeah, I agree with you, Adamya, that he really did want to just get at Islam or get at that culture specifically, which I thought was a shame, because as much as that's relevant to the conversation, halfway through when he kind of raised these points already, I was like, okay, great, you've given me reason to believe sort of your idea that some moral choices can be answered objectively with science, I want you to now talk more about that. I want you to get to that main point and like you've got me on. I'm on your side here. I agree. Now talk about that. But the whole talk was a justification for that idea and not an exploration of it. So it's kind of a shame that all he wanted to do was really kind of push this idea underneath of this anti-Islam or that culture, instead of the idea that was actually really interesting, that he got everyone to. That was the thing he sold as the title of the TED Talk, to get everyone in.
Yeah.
That idea was the thing that I actually wanted to hear about, but instead he was using that idea to then sort of punch holes in other people's cultures.
If I was a Sam Harris fan, I would enjoy that talk. If I was a person that went to watch that thing based on the title, I'd be left sort of wanting and disappointed, saying I wanted more from that talk, because it seems like obviously Sam Harris is a well-read individual. He's done a lot of reading and he's got points. And he said he's not a scientist, so he's not a physicist, and he hasn't got that amazing science knowledge that some people have. So it's very much really specific about these sort of Judo Christian religions, those where he argues against them primarily. And at the beginning of the talk, he was talking about the science stuff. It felt like he just read this somewhere, or like he got told this, and then he just wanted to go into like what he really wanted. Like, this is why I'm really here. And that you could really see that by the end of the talk when he asked the Q&A. And the guy asked him, if the science comes out and it does say that they love their daughters equally, what would you do? And he's like, I still wouldn't accept it. And then he gave a reasoning for that. I'm like, come on, you can't do that. Like,
very good point. Yeah, that's the whole point of science. If you're a real believer in science, is if there's good enough proof to disprove your claim, then you should change your mind.
Yeah.
You change your mind if science does. And he was saying that even if they did prove that, it's just because they're delusional and therefore like it. And so
almost saying that science can't answer everything. That's what he's saying.
Because how can science distinguish between someone who's not delusional and who's someone who is? And then we come back to this moral high ground which you raised, Oiva, where it's, he's standing here with the perspective of being in an American culture, in a Western culture that he considers civilized and sophisticated. And he's judging others. Oh, great, he pointed out one thing bad in his culture about over-sexualization. But surely that's not the only thing bad about it, and surely you are also speaking from some, you're biased to the culture that you're in. And how can you... And I think it is interesting to think, can you get away from that bias and really think more sort of about morals objectively? And I'd love to say that that's true, but you never know.
Exactly, that was, I think your key point there was when you said... belief. You use the belief word in science because it's not about belief. It's more about proving stuff right, and that's about knowledge, and that's something true belief. But in my mind, just belief is kind of like a faith. It's kind of like a system of beliefs where you have your opinions, and that was one of the things about him. Like, he's this big guy talking about big topics, talking to a big audience, and the audience is shut. The audience doesn't really say anything. So what he's doing, he's trying to change the opinion of them. But is he doing much else? Like, he's giving his subjective. He should, in a conversation like that, there should be two people, but there's only one person having the conversation.
He had a lot of good points, and you could see that he was like, he's read about it, about Islam, so he had good points about it. But I think he could have gone about it a lot better than bashing it, rather than he could have talked about it as almost a person and explaining what they do, and be a bit more considerate rather than saying they're not like civilized. Even if the science comes out, they're deluded, and that was the problem where he had all these facts and then he opinionized them and he started saying, even if these turn out to be false, I'm not gonna like stand away from my own opinion, which almost is deluded yourself. You're deluded if you don't believe scientific facts. That is the definition of deluded. So you're calling someone else deluded because the science says they're not. And
when you've defined what it means. Yeah. Anyway.
Can we switch the topic that we've
let's do it. Okay, Suresh, you brought up the topic.
If you click on the first link of every main text page in Wikipedia, which is not capitalized, you will eventually find your way into philosophy. And we've tried it, and it only doesn't work with Adam.
Okay, let me give you one example of this. Or any of you guys, if you just read out each page that you go to as you go through it. Let's find one.
Can we try it on Finland?
Do it. go from Finland to...
We're gonna want to see your country and see if they relate to philosophy. Right, so the first one is sovereign state.
Yeah, you got there already.
Yeah, you're already there.
Yep.
State. leads
International
to philosophy.
law, states, or polity, entity, exists,
Yeah.
being,
Oh.
objective,
Yep.
philosophical. I don't think we'll get there. No, we got there. Philosophy.
Okay.
Why did you think you got there?
To go by concept,
Objectivity.
I typed in poo into Wikipedia. Feces. Waste. Subjective. Philosophical.
No.
3 clicks away. How did they put in waste the first thing? The term is often subjective, so there's kind of like subjective, conceptual. These kind of things are one of the first links to the, because they try to describe something, and philosophy is often used to describe stuff that people know stuff.
You might find yourself in an infinite loop, which I found myself when I was trying to go from Steve Jobs to philosophy, and at some point I got to atoms, which the first link in that page went to matter, and the first link in the page matter went back to atoms, and so I was just going round and round and round, and I couldn't get anywhere. So that's one of the cases where it doesn't happen. I guess.
6%.
Yeah.
Nice. It's weird though.
That's cool.
Sad.
I think we should call it.
Yeah.
Who's doing the outro?
Oiva.
Oiva.
Me? Why not?
Just do it.
We had a good run, and that was the red switch.
You say we had a good
Thank
run
you.
when we're like retiring. We had a good run, guys. We gave it our all.
So that was the red switch. We had a bad run, but
Alright guys, that was Red Switch the podcast. Thanks for listening.
do you know the site ratemypoo.com?
Rate my what?
Ratemypoo.com.
Pew.
Poo. Poo.
Poo.
Like shit.
Yes.
What? Why?
I don't know. We were just talking crap.
Ratemypoo.com. Let's find this.
It's like a top 10 poo of the world.
Oiva seems the most critical of like internet. Like he doesn't use Facebook except for the practical stuff. Yeah, you're the one that comes with the weirdest websites ever. You're the one judging social media.
Come on! Fucking Rate My Poo is not going to make you feel bad.
Wow,
That might do if you don't like. Look
I have
at
to be honest, these are some.
Read these 10 shocking facts that make
What
you
is
feel
that?
depressed.
What is that? That is horrible. And that's only number 9.
Oh my god!
Oh, yeah.
Oh shit! It's a number 2.
What are you guys? I'm like 4 years old. That shit is decades old by now. That's a fucking old.
Oh, that's even worse to think about. Oh,
That's
man.
That's a 10-year-old poo.